It is 4 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order and we'll start with the roll call, please.
Mayor Sue Patterson,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Warren Dickert,
Present.
Councillor Harold Fleet,
Present.
Councillor Dave Hawking,
Present.
Councillor Carol Hudson,
Present.
Councillor Brandon Cable,
Present.
Councillor Susan Sackle.
Present. Thank you. All members are accounted for. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement. As we work toward reconciliation with Indigenous people, we begin our meeting today by respectfully acknowledging that we are situated on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the people of Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. So we'll continue with our agenda. Item 4, agenda additions or deletions. We do not have any. Item 5 is the health and safety message, and it's brought to you by me this afternoon. So in recognition of Building Month, we have a building safety starts at home. Keeping your home maintained is important to ensure you're living in a safe environment. Home maintenance encompasses a wide range of preventative tasks that all contribute to occupant health, occupant safety, and security, and overall sustainability. Here are a few tips for maintaining a safe and healthy home environment. Never overload electric outlets, power bars, or extension cords. Don't use damaged extension cords or appliances that have damaged cords. For mold prevention, watch for leaky pipes, condensation, and wet spots, and fix sources of moisture problems as soon as possible. Check for signs of an unsafe deck or balcony and repair or replace loose or wobbly railings and support beams, missing or loose screws, rot, corrosion, and cracks. Maintain heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. Keep drip pans clean, replace dirty filters, and perform regular maintenance. Install smoke alarms on every level of the home and outside each sleeping area. Inspect exterior walls for loose and damaged bricks, wall bowing or bulging, as well as foundations for cracks or other visible damage. Ensure swimming pools are surrounded by an appropriate fence or barrier, and inspect sidewalks, driveways, and steps to ensure they are level and unbroken. Item 6 on the agenda is delegations. We have one delegation this afternoon, and we have Jennifer Stevens here. She is the General Manager for Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. Welcome, Jennifer.
We tried to be all ready. Thank you very much, Mayor Patterson, and to you, Council, for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon, pardon me. There we go.
Jennifer, just before we start, I missed something very important. Does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest or a conflict of interest? Seeing none, you may declare it then. And I do want to welcome everyone for this meeting, Committee of the Whole, May the 1st, Monday, May the 1st. And good afternoon to Council staff, guests, and the viewing public, and of course, the media. I missed a lot on that one. So I was excited about getting to the conservation presentation. So it's all yours, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. And this will be a scintillating presentation. Pretty pictures and everything. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to present to you an overview of the programs and services at Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. Before I delve into our programs and services, I'd be remiss if I didn't review what a watershed is. Essentially, a watershed is a catchment area. When rain falls, it either infiltrates into the ground, it evaporates back into the atmosphere, or it runs off. So what happens on your property impacts essentially your neighbors and vice versa. And why that's important is conservation authorities are delineated on a watershed scale. We are one of 36 conservation authorities across Ontario under the umbrella organization of Conservation Ontario. Our headwaters are in the Osprey wetlands, which are on the eastern side of our watershed, and the Saugeen River runs westward into Lake Huron. We have 15 different municipalities that comprise our watershed. Our board of directors comprises 15 different directors, and we are the 5th largest geographic watershed in terms of a conservation authority in the province. We have 4,700 square kilometers, so we are quite large, and we have 118 kilometers of shoreline. So in terms of what I'm here to tell you about is, yes, I'm here to talk to you about our programs and services, but over the last year and a half, there's been a number of changes in terms of the regulations impacting conservation authorities. And you'll see by these bubbles, all of these different regulations have to-dos and things that we have to finish over the next year and a half, actually, by December of 2024. And one of those things is related to our mandatory programs and services and non-mandatory programs and services. So now it's up to each conservation authority to identify their mandatory programs and services, which are outlined by the province, and then identify which non-mandatory programs and services they will carry out. If they are going to carry out non-mandatory programs and services, they are required to enter into an agreement with each municipality within their watershed to carry out those non-mandatory programs and services. And those agreements need to be entered into by December of this year. So you can see that this is a preamble for coming back to you to enter into an agreement for our non-mandatory programs and services. Now, what you will see in front of you with this presentation are the majority of the programs and services that we offer at Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority are in fact mandatory. We have very few programs and services that would fall under the umbrella of non-mandatory programs and services. One of our major programs is flood and erosion control prevention. And this it's an umbrella program, which has 4 different groupings. Regulation of development in floodplains, flood forecasting and warning, water infrastructure maintenance and inspection, as well as emergency planning. These are essentially called non-structural approaches, and they're essentially meant to keep people away from water. We also have structural approaches, which are intended to keep water away from people, and these are dams, dikes, and channel works. I will be discussing each of these individually. Our flood warning program is a flagship, if you will, of our flood forecasting and warning program. Essentially, all of this map shows all of these triangles, and these triangles are stream gauges, as well as precipitation gauges that are located across our watershed. And these stream gauges and precipitation gauges relay routine information concerning watershed river conditions back to our early warning system and central control system at the Conservation Authority. So we're able to know what kind of river conditions we have, how high are our rivers, our streams, and that allows us to provide an early warning, rapid advanced system and provide technical support to municipalities such as the town of Hanover insofar as when there are floods coming, and when there are when we need to identify and notify landowners or people who have property that might be endangered by floodwaters, as well as people who might be endangered by floodwaters. In doing so, we actually have what are called flood warning messages, and these are consistent across the province. And these are grouped into 3 different groupings. We have watershed condition statements or water safety statements. And these essentially give an early warning that there's high runoff. Our streams are a little bit high. We need to keep our eye out for flooding. And we want to remind the public that our streams and ponds, our rivers might be unsafe to use for recreational purposes. Our banks might be unstable, and we want people to be cognizant of the conditions. And when we send out our flood warning messages for watershed condition statements, they're always identified by a yellow banner. Then we have a flood watch message, which is identified by an orange banner. And these are issued when there's a potential for generalized flooding. And this is when there is a potential for that flooding throughout the watershed or just in specific municipalities. And then we move on to a flood warning, which is the red banner. And this is where flooding is imminent or it's about to occur. And this is typically just for a specific part of the watershed. And about 3 weeks ago, we had a lot of water that fell. We were in a flood watch for a number of days. We moved into a flood warning for several municipalities, and then we moved back into a flood watch. And having this consistent messaging is very helpful to ensure that everybody is aware of that important messaging and what it means. Now, in terms of our environmental planning and regulations department, we regulate development in the floodplain, but we also are responsible for a regulation called the Regulation of Development Interference to Wetlands and Alterations to Shorelines and Watercourses. So we are responsible for those activities, and we issue permits for those activities. We also are responsible for reviewing Planning Act applications with respect to natural hazards. And natural hazards are defined as flooding and erosion. And we review those specific activities as they relate to certain development to ensure that development remains safe for people and property. We also review municipal drains as well as environmental assessments. But these Planning Act applications and our regulation are delegated to us by the province in terms of our responsibility insofar as natural hazards. When each municipality reviews their official plan and their zoning bylaw, it's our responsibility to ensure that the official plan and zoning bylaws are consistent with the provincial policy statement insofar as the policies as they relate to natural hazards and flooding. And that has remained consistent for a number of years. Even now, we're moving forward with the review of a new provincial planning instrument. That document is also remains consistent, that conservation authorities are to review local planning instruments for the purposes of natural hazards. We want to make sure that essentially building takes place in safe areas for the purposes of flooding as well as erosion processes. Oops. Another one of our mandatory programs is the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. And when Justice O'Connor recommended how we can avoid another Walkerton, he recommended the best way to do that was on a watershed scale. Let's protect our drinking water at its source. Let's protect our surface water and our groundwater. And insofar as recommending a watershed approach, conservation authorities were already set up at that time. So he recommended drinking water source protection plans be developed on a watershed scale. So we are part of the Saugeen Valley, Grey Sauble, Northern Bruce Peninsula, a source protection region. And that source protection region has one source protection plan, and 100% of the drinking water source protection policies in that source protection plan have been implemented. We have 153 risk management plans that have been developed in that source protection region. And those plans have been developed because no other means existed to actually manage the drinking water threats that were identified. So we wanted to protect our drinking water. So these risk management plans were created. Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority has the responsibility to help protect municipal sources of drinking water. And we helped maintain that drinking water source protection program. We also have a mandatory program insofar as the conservation of land. We take care of 153 different properties that are comprised of 86 different groupings. So some of those properties come together and are located as a grouping. And we have 53 kilometers of recreational trails. And we're responsible for taking care of those conservation areas, those conservation lands, making them available to the public, and making sure that there's maintenance and improvement projects taking place on those authority properties and trails. In terms of our forestry and stewardship programming, our forestry program is quite extensive. We have a good portion of our conservation of land properties have forests on them. Therefore, that particular aspect of our forestry program is considered mandatory. We have 8,000 hectares of authority forested properties. However, we also have a fairly extensive tree planting and tree marking and tendering program. We also work with local landowners to develop plans on their property to protect their local forests. Those types of programs are non-mandatory, but because of the way that it protects the watershed, we would like to continue these programs because they are in the best interest of the watershed. We consider these programs stewardship programs, and they help us to ensure the water quality of the watershed is maintained. Speaking of water quality, I touched on hydrology earlier when I spoke about the stream gauge network. I want to briefly touch on the chemistry and the biology of our water quality program, which we've created to establish baseline water quality data across our watershed, to observe trends in water quality, as well as to assess the effectiveness of our watershed programs, such as our forestry programs. We have 29 different stations across our watershed. A good proportion of those are part of what's called the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network. That particular network and participation in that network is a mandatory program and service. Where we have additional monitoring stations that are not part of that network, they are considered a non-mandatory program. We would like to continue monitoring at those sites, though, because they fill gaps that are not filled by the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network. We also do what's called biomonitoring, and that is where we we actually use small invertebrates that we find in the sediments of the streams and rivers and lakes where we monitor. And these small bugs essentially have a very narrow tolerance range for environmental conditions. Instead of just getting a snapshot, which we would get from the water chemistry, we're getting the life cycle of a bug. And that bug essentially tells us more than that snapshot. The biomonitoring program, although part of what's called the Ontario Benthos Biomonitoring Program, is not a mandatory program and service. Therefore, to continue carrying on this program, we would require an agreement with our municipalities to do so. We also have our groundwater monitoring network, which is an extensive participation in the Provincial Groundwater Monitoring Network. It is a mandatory program and service. And we carry out monitoring at 23 different aquifers, accessible at 14 different sites. We look at bedrock aquifers that are deep into the ground, as well as we look at very shallow overburden aquifers. Our budget is approximately $6 million. You'll notice that the green part of the pie is our general levy programs, and that's what the town of Hanover contributes to in the amount of $135,000. We have non-general levy programs, just over $2 million. And those are programs which we generally run that are self-sustaining. For example, we have campgrounds that are non-mandatory programs and services, but we pay for those campgrounds ourselves, and they self-generate the funds needed to maintain those campgrounds. So lastly, I just wanted to mention these programs and services. Mandatory programs and services fit into category 1. Category 2 are programs and services where a conservation authority has been asked on behalf of a municipality to carry out a program and service on their behalf. So this year, for example, we work with the town of Hanover to do educational programs in the summer. We will continue that this summer. However, we will no longer be offering educational programs past this year. However, if we were, we would need to enter into an agreement with the town of Hanover for those educational services. Category 3 are programs and services that a conservation authority deems are in the best interest of their watershed, and therefore they would need to enter into an agreement with the municipalities to carry out those programs and services. And those agreements need to be in place, as I said, by January the 1st, 2024. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Jennifer, for your presentation. With a $6 million budget, do you share any services with Grey Sauble Conservation?
Through you, Mayor Patterson? No, we do not.
Would there be a benefit to do so?
We have discussed in the past, we have actually shared some educational programs with Grey Sauble, but in terms of other programs, there's not really a benefit to carrying on with Grey Sauble. There's really the difference in travel time and in terms of the direction each conservation authority is going, the local flavor. There really is, each conservation authority has its own direction and strategic way of moving forward. So I think that certainly from our point of view, our board of directors has given us the direction that we're to focus on mandatory programs and services. That direction has not been given to Grey Sauble.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Jennifer. Could you sort of highlight for me how many programs have moved from the mandated status to the non-mandated? You mentioned the summer programs that you previously did for the town of Hanover. Would that be considered mandated before the new mandates, or?
So through you, Mayor Patterson, it's not so much that they've moved from mandatory to non-mandatory. The province has dictated that certain programs are mandatory and other programs are considered non-mandatory. So certain programs related to flooding and erosion are considered mandatory, and other programs that fall outside of the realm of that sort of umbrella are considered non-mandatory.
Second question, if I may, is this going to impact your overall budget for 2024 when if you're going to carry on the similar services, you're going to have to get funding from municipalities in order to do that, correct?
So through you, Mayor Patterson, no, because instead of the money is essentially coming from the same sources. It's just being divvied off. So right now, instead of our budget saying, so right now it's $6 million. So let's keep it at a reasonable, even amount. So if we were to carry out the same programs and services next year, instead of our budget being $6 million for the purposes of our levy, it would be, our levy actually is just over $2 million. So the levy would be 2 million minus about $200,000, which is the amount that it costs to carry out our non-mandatory programs and services. So that non-mandatory programs and services would come under an agreement.
Third question. Sorry to belabor this.
No,
So you offer a great service to our entire watershed. Do you plan to send out sort of letters of understanding to municipalities for the non-mandatory programs? Just as a reminder, so that we as council are made aware of that, if we don't sort of act, we're not going to have this same program that you just mentioned that has been going on a consistent basis for our children.
absolutely. Through you, Mayor Patterson, absolutely, that will happen. With the agreement will be an appendix that will list the actual programs that we would be offering under an agreement. And right now, we're essentially looking at which particular programs and services we would continue to offer.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Other comment, Councillor Cable?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for your presentation. Could you speak a little bit to the changes with Bill 23 around development application reviews? It's my understanding that maybe there's been a shift in the services that the Conservation Authority provides as far as kind of reviewing whether it's subdivision applications, looking at I don't know if it's natural heritage features or things like that.
Absolutely. Through you, Mayor Matt Patterson. The only real difference at this point in time is the fact that effective January the 1st, 2023, the Conservation Authority can no longer enter into an agreement with municipalities for the purposes of offering comments or recommendations with respect to natural heritage. And that is indeed an unfortunate turn of events, because with respect to the expertise that the Conservation Authority has, we already have to take a look at a number of the documents that have to be reviewed for the purposes of natural heritage, for the purposes of our natural hazards review. So it was almost, it's almost like a duplication of work, but not really. We already had to review those documents, and now that responsibility has been taken away from us and has been given to the municipalities, and the municipalities now have to pay money to get that done by an external party, typically either hiring somebody with that skill set at the county, or hiring a consultant to do that work. And that work could have been done by the Conservation Authority. So there are other implications of Bill 23. But at this point in time, they have not been put into effect yet. So at this point in time, the main factor that has been really put into effect is that natural heritage provision.
Okay, and that's not something that you'll be offering as a service that we can join on to?
Oh, as of January the 1st, we can no longer do that.
Great, thank you. And one more question. You mentioned about the 153 risk management plans. Am I correct in assuming that there's one of those plans for Rural Lake just outside of town?
I don't know specifically where the risk management plans are in the town of Hanover, but I know that all the risk management plans required for the town of Hanover are in place.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I can ask Ron, but I know there is a risk management plan for that, correct, Ron?
Yeah, there has. We've been working through Grace Harbor Conservation Authority, and they've identified all the risk plans that need to have in place, and they're coordinating that on our behalf.
Andrew, you had a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, just to follow up with Jen and your question, Councillor Cable, since January 1st, the town's been operating with the understanding that if natural heritage was required to be commented on, that we would be under contract with a third party to conduct those services. As Jen says, the same amount of work would have to be done either way, which they're doing already to comment on. I don't want to call it their half, but just say that portion. So now a third party can do the same amount of background work as well as just provide on that portion. So, you know, right now the expense is greater. The county is looking currently at hiring some people on staff to cover that natural heritage piece. Obviously, most local municipalities don't have a biologist or an ecologist on staff to be able to properly conduct that review.
So, and I can say that the province is not allowing or permitting the conservation to hire out for heritage comments.
That's correct.
So even if they wanted to, they're not allowed to, which is unfortunate. And I hope that that part of the bill gets revisited.
Rescinded.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So Jennifer, you and some of your staff will be visiting all the municipalities for this memorandum of understanding before the end of the year, correct?
It'll probably be me again. And so we will be bringing a memorandum of understanding to our board of directors at their May meeting. And that will be for them to review and to authorize me moving forward with that memorandum of understanding. And then I will proceed with reaching out to the municipalities with that draft MOU and with a goal of essentially entering into an agreement with each municipality.
Very good. All right, there's one thing I do want to comment with regards to the important work that the Conservation Authority is doing. During orientation at the Saugeen Valley, the first meetings you have with whatever committee or board you're on, there's always a presentation that shows the risk and what can happen if the watershed is not managed and the damage that water can do to infrastructure and buildings and just land in it by itself. And the risk for lives for people is just amazing. They've got a slide deck that they can show you back years and years of what water has done to the area. So it's so important that we manage the water and just keep things safe for everyone. So
that is our goal.
yes. Okay, I don't see any other questions or comments. Thank you very much for presenting. We appreciate it and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, Mayor Patterson and Council, for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks. All right, item 7 on the agenda, business arising from the minutes. We do not have any. Item 8 is staff reports. And the first one, 8.1, is report PB 12-23. The subject is site plan control bylaw. And it's from Andrew Wilkin, our building services manager and CBO. And I need a mover and seconder to put this on the floor. Councillor Fleet and Deputy Mayor. Andrew, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. On May the 5th, 1986, Council passed bylaw 1552-05-05-86, being a bylaw to designate the town of Hanover as an area of site plan control that regulates development exceeding 50 square meters and including alterations to a building and structures that substantially increase the usability thereof. As you know, site plan control is a tool to ensure the development and redevelopment of buildings and lands and ensure that they're designed appropriately and include such elements as loading, parking, landscaping to a degree, grading, servicing, buffering, etc. At the July 11th meeting, report PB 19-22, it was a report generated by MHBC, outlined legislative updates the town would need to undertake as a result of legislative changes coming into effect. At this meeting, if you recall, it was noted that there would be future legislative updates as well. This was Bill 109 discussion. Since then, we've talked extensively about Bill 23 and a new bill, the next phase that's just starting to come into play, Bill 97. But at that time, that Bill 109 specifically was being implemented to expedite housing construction with improved government services and streamlining of approvals. The direction at the time of that meeting was to wait for further comments and inputs from other bodies, authorities, prior to revising or amending any of our current bylaws. Which, as it's May of 2023, I can say we've done that. Again, so in late November, we received word of Bill 23, which received royal assent and led to additional changes of the Planning Act, and specifically certain provisions relating to Site Plan Control and Development Charges Act. Within Bill 23, it has been mandated that the development of residential properties up to 10 units be exempt from site plan control. Previously, our bylaw had 3. So this draft amendment or this draft bylaw amendment picks up the 10. In addition, matters relating to exterior design as well as sustainable design are removed from the scope of the approval. In the update, as well, as I briefly said, originally the area of 50 square meters was used as a site plan control tool. We've amended it to 100 square meters or 10% of the gross area of the floor area. If there was 800 square meter building, then 80 would be the number. Then it would be subject to site plan control. As is required through Bill 109, council must delegate authority if a site plan control bylaw is in effect, which it has been here since 1986. Through discussions with Grey County Planning, as well as town staff, it is recommended that the CAO and CBO be delegated authority under section 41(2) of the Planning Act to approve plans, drawings, and impose conditions and to require any necessary agreements. This does not preclude any inter-office discussions or conversations with county planning and inputs to ensure that any agreement complies with all applicable laws, bylaws, and servicing requirements. While council would no longer be the site plan control approval authority as mandated in Bill 109, it is anticipated that any site plan control agreement that council should or wishes to be apprised of be provided to council as an information report. Right now, it comes to council, obviously, with you having authority, it comes to council anyway. The intent would be that when it comes to council moving forward, it would be provided as an information report. So you are apprised of all the information that would be included in that site plan control agreement. It would be prudent for council to provide some guidelines to determine a threshold of which reports or site plan agreements you wish to be apprised of. That could be determined through size of development, cost of construction of development, location of development, C1 zone, industrial park, something along those lines. Additionally, in some instances, there are financial impacts to a site plan control agreement where the town agrees to financial terms. An example would be a cost sharing for services with a developer, which is included in the site plan control agreement itself. It is staff's recommendation that any site plan control agreement that may have financial implications beyond the typical rates and fees bylaw. The typical rates and fees bylaw, it really simply talks about a cost per agreement plus so much per square meter or so much per unit. So a financial implication beyond those terms, that the site plan control agreement have a condition that a memorandum of understanding be finalized to the satisfaction of the town. And that would be a condition within the site plan control agreement itself that would need to effectively be executed to finalize that site plan control agreement. The MOU would be brought to council for approval when the financial implications are beyond budget approval or the current procurement policy threshold for department head authorization. This would provide council with the ability to approve such financial agreements prior to the site plan control agreement taking effect. And lastly, just of note, these mandatory changes do not exempt Planning Advisory Committee from still receiving applications prior to them being finalized. So Planning Advisory Committee will remain in the same role as it has been in the past. A lot of municipalities do not have a Planning Advisory Committee, so most don't have this option. Ours do, so they will continue to provide comment, many or all of which you typically would see when that site plan control agreement comes to council. And those comments would be used by staff as well as they finalize a site plan control agreement. The draft bylaw is attached, so and will be included for approval at the next council meeting. There are no direct financial implications associated with this report. The link to the strategic plan is economic development and sustainable municipal operations. And the recommendation is that report PB 12-23 site plan control bylaw, Bill 109, Bill 23 updates be received by council, and that council pass a bylaw to designate and define certain classes of development for site plan control at its next council meeting. And I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Andrew, for your report. So just a point of clarity, Andrew, at the end of your report, it says, well, many municipalities no longer have a planning advisory committee. So that suggests that they did have one, but they no longer do. Why would they dispose of that?
Through you, Your Worship. I'm sure every municipality has their own reasons. I would say our mandate is the Planning Act. The Planning Act does not require that it does not make mention of a planning advisory committee or their requirement within the process under the Planning Act for the development. I'm assuming just over time, they've just disappeared for municipalities, whether that's maybe the comments weren't of importance or council did not see a need for them. I would say our planning advisory committee provides good comment and there's good discussions at those meetings. If you haven't tuned into one of those, it's a good conversation and they're knowledgeable at planning as well as typical issues that would come up with neighbors and kind of presenting those issues and getting the input of an applicant. So I would say, I don't know why most of them have disappeared. I'm sure there's a reason, but them not being mandatory might play into a part of that.
Thank you.
Other Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the report, Andrew. I appreciate some of the recommendations that are in here, particularly around site plans coming forward with this memorandum of understanding for any that would be outside of the rates and fees, typical rates and fees bylaw. I'm wondering if there's a reason why that particular kind of clause is not contained within the bylaw on page 27 and 28. And I think my only wondering is because it's great that it's in the staff report, but ultimately, if in the future yourself or Sherry are not here and we don't have that staff report, how are future staff going to know that something outside the rates and fees would be brought to council?
Through Your Worship, I might ask for a bit of assistance. I'm going to comment first, but maybe a bit of assistance maybe from the clerk or Sherry, just maybe around the policy or procedure aspect of it. I would be hesitant to put it specifically in the bylaw. It just gives an applicant an idea that maybe we're up for a cost sharing, and that's certainly I wouldn't want to pique the interest and bring that conversation up immediately. We typically haven't really considered it unless it's really an in-depth or a large project, something that has great interest of the town or the public. So I don't think I'd want it in there. I wouldn't want somebody going through site plan control agreement for an 800 square foot maybe addition to something, and then wanting to bring in the conversation about a cost sharing. So understood the question, but I'm not sure the correct answer as to where it should go in terms of a policy or a procedure. Maybe that's something I could get some guidance on.
Sure, thanks, your worship, and thanks, Andrew. And I would concur with Andrew that including it in there may open that. And if I'm understanding things correctly too, right? This is something that we are doing as a process internally that is really not a requirement of site plan control process. So, you know, we want to make sure it's more of an internal process. So it may be something that we just have to document within a site plan control process piece that it's documented for staff accordingly.
So I guess as a follow-up, your worship, would the, in here it talks about it's prudent for council to provide guidelines around the threshold at which reports would come back to council. How would we document council's wishes for that? And would that be reviewed on like each council term council would decide, or would that be documented in a bylaw? How are we determining when the reports are coming back to council?
I would say again that if we had an internal staff process that based on this term of council, that these are the examples of when we would bring a site plan control here for information purposes, and whether that needs to be revisited at the start of every council term, that's probably a good suggestion, because then we get an idea of what we've got a basis. Is there any revisions for this at the next term of council?
Thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions? All right, I don't see any, so I will call the question. All in favor of PB 12-23? That is carried. Thank you.
Sorry, your worship, when are we going to clarify? Is it could be in a future time where we're going to clarify the criteria that we would like to see used?
Andrew, will you be bringing a list of sorry, Vicky's
If I could just speak to that through your worship. My recommendation would be to have a report come back to council with guidelines for the process for site plan control approvals. If Andrew would be willing to, in conjunction with Sherry and or myself, draft a type of policy that could come back before council for their review and acceptance or approval.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you, worship. Then I would say in advance of that, if there are any site plan control agreements that are put in place prior to us coming to council with that, I'll just apprise council of all site plan control agreements until that process is in place.
Okay, so we're good with that. All right, and I believe it did pass. Everyone raised their hands, so we'll move on to the next item. 8.2 is report PW 1123. It is the drinking water quality management system, the annual update. It's from Mr. Cooper, our Director of Public Works, and I need a mover and seconder to put this on the floor. Councillor Cable and Councillor Sackel. Ron?
Thank you, worship. I'll take you through this document and its attachments there to get it summarized based upon the length and get to the reasons and the updates which we're providing to the elements in the drinking water quality management operational plan and how we've arrived at where we are. Just the background behind it. It's through the municipal drinking water licensing program, which is through the Minister of Environment. Conservation and Parks requires owners of municipal drinking water systems to develop an operational plan based upon the drinking water quality management standard. The operational plans are a written document of the operating authorities quality management system developed to meet the requirements of the drinking water quality standard. From For the town of Hanover, we've had this system. It's been fully implemented since February of 2012. It's included council endorsement, public notices through the municipal website and on water sewer billings. Hard copy is also available at the Civic Center. We have been providing updates to this on an annual basis, including the reviews that take place on an annual basis. And the previous endorsement on this was on February 4th of 2022. So to update us from April of 2022, I provided activities and review of the operational plan and coming up and what we're showing with the changes to get re-endorsed by council today. We had an external audit that was completed in August of 2022. On that, there was 5 opportunities for improvement. So if you went to page 111 of your package, it would show you the opportunities for improvement that come out of that external audit. And there was 5 of them. If you go to page 114 of the document, it actually summarizes and shows what element it would have affected out of our drinking water quality management system. And going back to page 111, it provides the opportunities for improvement that we have, gets a description of it, and provides a summary of how they feel, why the reasons behind implementing, how it could benefit us in incorporating these opportunities for improvement. So they have been incorporated into our operational plan. And again, in October of 2022, we had an internal audit done that provided 4 opportunities for improvement. That is shown on page 122 of the document, and that shows the elements, the opportunities for improvement. It actually shows the element that it was affected, and a brief description of the recommendation for us to incorporate those opportunities for improvement. They also have been updated in our documents. There would be some of those, they're either updated in the documents in the operational plan, or in some cases, they would only show up in terms of supporting documents, and therefore it would not be affected in the actual elements. One of the ones I'm thinking of is an opportunity for improvement out of element 13, which is essential service and supplies. It didn't affect us operating our operational plan because that was an internal document, which we have both for the distribution and on the treatment side, which identifies what our essential supplies were. Another one would be element number 20, I believe, which talks about, which is on the management review, and the opportunity for improvement. That was to indicate a person responsible, and if we had an action item there, put a deadline on it. That actually shows up in the document in which we go through, and it's not written in the description on our operational plan. So essentially there was no change to that element, but effectively we have incorporated the opportunities for improvement moving forward. The third document which is provided for you is management review, which was completed in December of last year. That's on pages 143 to 150. That document is actually a series of questions which is predetermined in the standard. It goes through the alphabet. I think it goes up to the letter Q of it. And it is items in there which we go through on an annual basis and we identify, and we're bringing information that has occurred in the last year forward, discussing it amongst our management team to see if there's any improvements that need to be made, incorporated into our overall system. So it's a further review of the ongoings within a yearly basis. Emergency training exercise we do on an annual basis. That occurred in October of last year. That's on pages 151 to 164 of the report. I think the important takeaway on that one, and that was a topic we did on a power line, power issue at our rural lake, and there is on page 164. When we did that training exercise, it went through a debrief of that exercise. One of the things that we were looking at is some additional measures in terms of tree trimming and looking at the power supply line coming into rural lake. I can tell you that we have followed up with that, and we have had the tree trimming completed back from the hydro line, and we're working at trying to get an outside contractor in to assess the poles, which they're identified as privately owned, which is ours. They're not part of the it's actually Hydro One that supplies us the power, but it's not part of their distribution system. So we're going to get a third party in to check the integrity of the poles of that. So that was a good exercise, identified some things, and we've did some follow-ups in terms of due diligence related to that. In terms of the actual drinking water quality management standard, I can maybe just highlight the elements which have changed, if you don't mind. And I can say that they have been minor, and they're more often they're related to, we've had some staffing changes, and it's updated to reflect that. Point in case, element number 3, commitment endorsement. It used to be CAO clerk. Now the reference is CAO, so that has been updated. QMS representatives, there have been some changes in that. That has been updated to reflect a new public works foreman, which is shown as a QMS representative, and that is Andrew Dipple. So that has been updated in the documents. Then we moved out element number 9, which is organizational structure. We have changed that one around. It has moved the CAO position. Is that being part of the operating authority? I believe on the previous document, it had shown CAO as being in the owner category. So and that was a recommendation we came from the audits, that the owner category should be council, and the staff that are part of that should be all within the operating authority. Whether they're operators, then there's another category which shows it into management. And then we give the actual operators. So it kind of splits up, further identifies and breaks down the roles and responsibilities in that element. Element number 1, personnel coverage. That is something that has came about, which there is a legislation in there which allows us to, if we have had operators that have operated a system within the last 60 months, to on a temporary basis, allow them to operate this system and be designated as overall responsible operator. That change and that requirement came into place kind of when we had the COVID thing. There was, concerns about being shortage of operators and what what could be done if the overall responsible operator was unavailable. So there was some changes in legislation which allowed us to make that occur. And element number 16 on the sampling and testing. That was some documents which we reference in there, standard operating procedures. We have updated those to reflect current requirements. Element number 17 was recording and calibration. That one has a standard operating procedure has been updated, some slight changes. In the last year, when we went through our emergency contact list and response plan, element number 18, that's been updated in the last year to reflect current contacts. And element number 19, internal audits. That was an OFI that came, I believe, within internal audit. Previously, we said in there, to be an auditor, you had to have done 2 previous audits. That actual requirement out of the standard is not there. You still have to have went through the auditing courses. So we've updated that to reflect current standards. And the other one was Appendix B, risk management. That's updated annually. Every 3 years, we go in and do an extensive review, but it was just an annual review that was completed in 2022. So that summarizes the changes which we've made to the operational plan. The link to strategic plan would be sustainable municipal operations. And the recommendation is the report PW 1123 drinking water quality management system annual update be received, and the council accept the external audit, internal audit management review, and emergency training exercises completed in 22, and the council approves, endorses the updated operational plan, which I have presented to you. If there would be any questions, I would be happy to address.
Thank you, Ron. Council? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the report, Ron. Not really a question, just a comment that it is a very long report, but it's a very important service that we do supply from the town, and I think it's just want to congratulate the department for internal audit, external audit, and they have some opportunities for improvement, but they've all been acted on. And in reading them, they look like it's not mission critical type stuff, but just to improve on the monitoring and all that. So it gives us a good level of confidence that our water supply is safe and being well looked after. And just thank you and your department for doing a great job on that.
Very good. Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, first of all, Ron, I've never heard you say so many words all at once, so congrats. I too want to congratulate you. Boy, I'm so impressed with all the work. Having gone through the Walkerton water crisis as a teacher, teaching at the time there, I really pay attention to everything that you have. And I suppose as a teacher, I'm going to ask this question. Tell me, what kind of training do your operators do? Like what schooling, training that they do to become an overall responsible operator?
Okay, I'll work you through a little process on that one. The starting level would be operator in training. Then they have to have that for 1 year before they could write and get into a level 1. Then it goes from level 1 to level 4 based upon years of experience in increasing responsibilities in systems, and also you have to be operating to get into the class 3 and class 4. You got to be designated as an operator in charge for a certain period of time. So as the classes increase more in depth, within the first year, if you're coming on as an operator in training, you have to take a 5-day operator and training course, and that's held through Walkerton Clean Water Center. So once you get through that course and successfully pass, then it's after that time that you can count your hours moving forward to move on and get into level 1, which would be the first level requirement.
If I may. So they don't do schooling per se, they go through courses online, I would assume, or tell me more, Ron.
Some of the operators that we have brought in have had school training. School training typically will get them through their most would be a college course. Through those courses, get them through their operator and training certificate. But moving on from there, once you go through the levels, it's all operating in the systems, keeping up to date on the regulations and going through the training and standards that are current at the time when they're going through the process. The school helps once you get into moving into the level 3 certificates. If you have taken post-secondary school training, then it helps reduce the number of training CUs that you are required to get into the higher levels, recognizing the post-secondary training and courses that you've taken.
One more question. Ron, looking at, just a minute now. All the work, all the January, your report for plant operations, January to March, all the little checklists that you have to do and the things that they're reporting on, there seem to be so many issues with flare stacks, heat exchange issues, yard hydrant bursts, all of that. Is that normal?
I would say most of them are a little bit normal. That would be at the wastewater plant. I guess through time, there's always ongoing routine maintenance that's required at the plant. These are issues which I'd say for the most part are on the smaller side, which we're able to repair and keep the facility operational and running. But we're always kind of, when things coming up, looking at the bigger picture to see if we can repair certain things at the plant and get to recurring issues, put to rest and move forward. But I guess I would say as facilities go on, they get older and sometimes there's more repair needed. So it's a learning curve for the staff on an ongoing basis.
Well, thank you. I was pretty impressed that they keep up with it so well. Thanks.
Okay, other Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Ron, for your report. You guys do a great job down there. Just have one question on page 68, owner, Town of Hanover, mayor, deputy mayor, and council. As owner, does that make us 100% responsible for the drinking water for the residents of Hanover?
I'll answer that one with a yes.
Thank you.
That's highlighted at the, whatever the course is we take for orientation, that yes, we are responsible. So as they say, the buck stops here. So, okay, I don't see any other hands raised, so I will call the question. All in favor of report PW 11-23. That's carried. Thank you, Ron. All right, 8.3 is report CL 0423. The subject is appointments to boards and committees. It's from our clerk, Vicky McDonald, and I need a mover and seconder to put this on the floor. And I have Councillor Hudson and Councillor Cable. Vicky, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The procedure bylaw for the town of Hanover governs the process and method for appointments to municipal boards and committees. These appointments are made at the required time by resolution of council, unless it's specifically required by bylaw. At the April 3rd meeting, council approved the establishment of a splash pad ad hoc committee to guide the development of a potential splash pad in Hanover. During that time, or shortly thereafter, we had resignations from a committee member from the Parks, Recreation, Culture Advisory Committee, as well as the Economic, Tourism, and Culture Development Advisory Committee. In addition to those resignations, we were still short on members for our Cultural Roundtable and Disc Golf Ad Hoc Committee. So a joint advertisement for appointees or interested individuals to sit on these committees was posted on our website and in the Post on April 13th. A number of applications were received. The Mayor Patterson has reviewed the submissions, and in the report, you'll see the recommendations for appointment to the various committees. One item of note is a typographical error on my part under the Splash Pad Ad Hoc Committee. Carol Eastman should be Carl. So appointments that are being recommended for the 2022-26 council term for the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Committee is Matthew Bender. Economic, Tourism, and Cultural Development Advisory Committee, Steve White. The Heritage Subcommittee approached us with regard to requiring an additional member. They have a great deal of work to do, and they're finding that the number of committee members is insufficient to deal with that workload at this time. So they're asking for the addition of one member to that committee. So the terms of reference would be amended to increase the committee membership to 9. And it was recommended that Gary Fleischhauer, who submitted an application, be appointed to that committee. And then finally, the Splash Pad Ad Hoc Committee members, Lee Cardwell, Mark Ebert, Rachel Thomas, Carl Eastman, Annette Haberson. And we also require one council appointee, which if anyone is interested, if we have a volunteer, we can make that appointment. Councillor.
Is there interest at this time? Councillor Hawking? Okay, any other people interested? Okay, if you're willing, we can appoint you this evening. Oh, if you're willing, we can appoint you this evening. Sorry, slipping up tonight.
All right, I will amend the report to include Councillor Hawking as the council appointee. And then there is one appointee to the Splash Pad Ad Hoc Committee representing Parks, Rec, and Culture Advisory. And they have selected, I believe, Marion Massaloop to sit as their representative. But that's to be confirmed by the advisory committee. There are no financial implications associated with this report. The strategic plan link is community. And the recommendation is that report CL 04-23 appointments to board and committees be received, that the Heritage Subcommittee composition be increased to 9 members, and that council approved committee appointments as outlined and amended in report CL 04-23 for the 2022 to 2026 council term. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Vicky. Are there questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of CL 04-23. That is carried. Thank you. Item 9 is correspondence requiring action, and we do not have any. Item 10 is reports and correspondence for information. The first one, 10.1, is report PW 0923. The subject is the wastewater treatment plant operations report for the first quarter. It's from Mr. Cooper, our Director of Public Works. And again, this is for information. So Ron?
On this report, I believe I've got 10 on the line. He could take you through this one, or if you want me, I can. I believe Ted is available.
Ted?
Yep.
Did you want to highlight the report?
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Okay, this is the report for the wastewater treatment plant from January 1st to March 31st, 2023. I'll just highlight a few of the major activities during that period. There's repairs to the heat system or the heat tracing and heat bulbs for the trash removal system. There's some repairs on the flare stack and heat exchanger by staff with assistance from Gas Logics. We play with the alum or aluminum sulfate dosage throughout those months to help increase ammonia reduction and also to adjust the pH or lower the pH. We had an exceedance of unionized ammonia on our final effluent on February 6th and again on March 20th. The limit for unionized ammonia is 1.25 milligrams a liter, which is a federal limit, and the provincial objectives 0.02. We did exceed by a fair bit. This was all reported to the federal and the federal government and the MECP. This also contributed to not meeting the requirements of our 96-hour acute toxicity test. But immediate actions were taken to get back into compliance, and we have been working with the MECP and Exceldor to stay in compliance. We have also increased our toxicity testing to bi-weekly due to us failing the acute toxicity test that we failed on March 31st. And we have since taken 2 of those tests, and they both have came back within the limits, and we will be continuing to take them until we have 3 positive results. That is all I got for highlights. I would be glad to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Ted. Are there any questions or comments? I have one, Ted. Is the flare stack, those issues, are they resolved? I noticed you replaced a motor, but you're still getting a fault with it.
So we replaced the igniter on it. Refurbished the igniter on it. We always do have a few faults on that flare stack, mostly due to wind and rain. Strong winds or heavy rains does put the flare stack out because it is an outside unit, and they are common throughout the year. But for the most part, it is working better with the rebuilt igniter.
Very good, and I'm glad to see you're making headway with the toxicity. So, Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ted, can you just explain what is meant by a 96-hour acute toxicity test? What does that all involve?
So acute toxicity test is we basically take a 5-gallon pail of water and we send it to a lab, and then they do basically put in 10 small little rainbow trout and see how they live or survive in the water, which they did not do very well over the 96 hours. That being said, our next 2 samples, they came back at 100%, and we have been working to improve our effluent since then.
Excellent. Thank you.
That was interesting, Ted. So, okay, I don't see any other hands raised, so we'll move on to the next report, 10.2. This is report PW 1023. Again, it's from Mr. Cooper, our Director of Public Works, and it is the water treatment plant operations report. And Ron, I'll just hand it right over to Ted. Ted, if you can highlight that, please.
Yep. So this is a water treatment plant operations report from January 1st to March 31st, 2023. A few of the highlights of the major activities during this period include, so we got our UVT, our ultraviolet transmittance analyzer, was taken offline January 11th and was sent back to Hawk, which is in London, and the company rebuilt it, and then we reinstalled it on February 6th. After being rebuilt, we have been servicing and rebuilding parts of our high lift pumps, and have been in talks with engineers regarding pressure fluctuations due to these pumps, the flow control valves on these pumps. with hopes to reduce water hammer and just make the pumps more efficient. We had an unannounced ministry inspection on February 27th. We have received the report and have not fully received the inspection rating, but the report has came back very good. And then we have also got our annual calibration and servicing of our flow meters, chlorine analyzers, and our turbidity analyzers done. I would happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Ted. Councillor Sacco.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for your report, Ted. I found it interesting that on February 12th, some people were found ice fishing on Rural Lake. So tell me about that. Is no one allowed on the lake, or how does that work?
No one's allowed to ice fish on the lake, or basically fish on a boat or anything to that sort. It is private property. It is our source water. We do keep a very close eye on it, and we make sure people aren't doing anything they're not supposed to be doing around it.
Excellent. Thank you.
No one is allowed to swim in that lake either, so. Yeah, other comments? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ted. Just a quick question on the amount of water making it to the distribution system on pages 179 to 181. It said in February, only 67% of it went to the distribution system. With other months, it's in the 82, 84%. Just wondering, was there a problem that caused that, or why the big drop in that?
So I believe that is actually a typo on my part. I do apologize. The max flow, there's one day for Rural Lake that had the max flow at 32,100 cubic meters. We would never be able to pump that much from Rural Lake in a day. It's actually, it was actually our max flow for that month was 3,519 cubic meters, which because of that little error that caused our plant to system reduction, instead of being 80% down to 67.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Seeing none, thanks, Ted. Item 10.3, this is the Source Protection Committee minutes from November 25th, 2022. You did hear Jennifer Stevens from the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority comment a bit about source water protection. And this committee meets quarterly, so it takes a while for those minutes to go through the process, get approved, and get back to us. It would be nice if we could receive these in draft form so that they were a little more current. And I will mention that to Jennifer because she is a member on that committee. But just so everyone is aware, this committee works to ensure drinking water is clean, safe, and sustainable by protecting sources of municipal drinking water, such as lakes, rivers, and well water. So they are continuing to keep our water safe. Item 10.4 is the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes. Councillor Hudson, if you could highlight those, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So at the meeting, Barbara Hicks was nominated for position of chair, and a few things that came up was the minor variance application A6-18. The Secretary Treasurer stated that the applicant advised that he does not want to revise his original application. And also a property on 898th Ave North. It was a newly created severed lot, and it'll be amended to have a frontage of 88 feet, where that includes an additional 8 feet that was added on to that. The property at 531 11th Ave, it was this was the one that they wanted to put a one-story addition onto the existing two-story dwelling for an additional unit for their teenage children. And they were also wanting to do a 40 by 40 accessory building for a shop and dwelling at the back of the property. So that had gone through, as well as the final one, a property on 9th Street, which they were building a deck on the back with a roof on it. And there was a lot of discussion about that, perhaps having some closed in capabilities, and that can be addressed at a later time. So that was also put through.
Thank you. Of course, if there's any questions for any of these minutes, just let me know. Item 10.5 is the Hanover Police Services Board meeting minutes from April 17th. And I will share that board documents and information that were on the town website under police services have now been moved to the police services website. But if you are on the town website and you click on police info, you will be automatically linked to the police site. And that was done to increase efficiency. Basic Constable Training Program, which is hosted in Aylmer, has been extended from 60 to 66 days. It's interesting now that the training is going to cover how to engage an active shooter. And that's included in that training rather than being done in-house. Crime Stoppers will be a delegation at our May meeting, so that will be interesting. And Chief Knoll noted that Hanover police officers are affected by the deaths of on-duty officers and realized that a routine call can be life-threatening and police work is unpredictable and dangerous. Since September 2022, 8 officers have been killed across Canada. And it was acknowledged that our chair, Selwyn Hicks, was and member Dave Hawking were recognized for the recent awards they received. Selwyn has been awarded the Lincoln Alexander Award by the Law Society of Ontario, recognizing his longstanding interest and commitment to the pursuit of community service on behalf of residents of Ontario. And member and Councillor Dave Hawking received the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Hanover Chamber of Commerce, recognizing his lifelong contributions and service to our community. Congratulations to both. And I also want to share that presentations about topics covering social media and bullying were presented at Hanover Heights and Holy Family Schools, and they were both well received. Open to questions if anyone has questions. Okay, item 10.6 is the Hanover Downtown Improvement Area, and there are 2 sets of minutes. Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Worship. Hanover DIA met February 16th, seems so long ago. Krista gave us an update on the Small Business Security Enhancement Grant. Springtime Shop and Spring promo was discussed. Springtime Shop and Win Radio program was discussed. The DIA board member was requested to join the new ETCDAC committee, Economic Tourism Culture Development Advisory Committee, and Jan Oliveira has joined that group. And discussions on Senior Day in downtown Hanover. Shawnee's offers a Tuesday discount. And that's from February 16th. I'll go right into March. SIP, we met on Thursday, March 23rd. SIP 21 downtown revitalization, DIA portion, max 2,000 per business. Joanne Switzer, JD Lyons, Brutons, all benefit from that program. March Shamrock promo, Hanover Spring and Shop again in April. We are still discussing Senior Days in downtown Hanover, and we discussed the Active Aging Expo, and that's all I've got to report from the DIA.
Thank you. There is one sentence in there that I would like our CAO to just clarify. The sentence said the trail bridges will be repaired shortly, and I'd like Sherry just to expand on that a bit, please.
Thank you, your worship. So that is correct. We have awarded the contract for the repair of the trail bridges on our south line. I would say that timing is to be determined. The exact timing is to be determined. We are awaiting the pre-construction meeting with the contractor and the engineer. I know the contractor is interested in putting forth a revised timing plan, which may it may not benefit for this year, but for next year, it would be a benefit. So thinking long-term versus the short term. So we'll wait to see that. So timing to be confirmed.
Thank you for that. Okay, that is the correspondence for information. Item 11 is planning and other meetings, and all of these town meetings and board meetings are listed on this agenda and of course on the town website. I know I look at it quite often when I'm trying to figure out when the next certain meetings are, so it's very good. Dates to remember and announcements. The next committee of the whole meeting is June the 5th, and it's at 4 p.m. The next regular council meeting is May 15th, also at 4 p.m. The municipal office will be closed on Victoria Day, which is May 22nd. And at this time, Councillor Hocking.
Thank you. Thank you, your worship. I just want to remind you of the May 13th, the councillors meeting at the airport. The Friends of the Airport are meeting this Saturday to discuss the agenda. Once I get that, I will float that out to you so you get some idea of what to expect next week Saturday. So again, thanks for acknowledging the invitation. It should be a good day. So thanks again.
Very good. Councillor Cable.
Thank you, your worship. Just a note that the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee will be having a special meeting this Wednesday, which is May the 3rd, to discuss the splash pad. That will be at 6 o'clock.
Okay, good. All right, I'll ask if there's any notices of motion. Seeing none, we do not have a closed meeting. So I need a mover and seconder to adjourn at 5:31. Councillor Sacco and Councillor Hocking, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you.